Inshallah, we'll get started with the exercises to lesson 11. And we'll try to get through them as quickly as possible. So if you can turn to lesson 11. We'll start with the active participle forms. When it comes to the sentences, some of the sentences in the exercises are a little bit odd. And so we'll just translate the sentences as they're found in the book, even if it's not the normal way that you would express the sentences in Arabic. In some cases, they're taken from Quranic verses with a little bit of a modification, but we'll go by what's in the book. So starting with the first exercise, letter A, it says that give the active participle with the masculine and feminine and definite and indefinite form. And before we begin, there's two things that you need to keep in mind here. If the verb has a weak letter in the middle, is there a difference between the definite and the indefinite form, aside from adding an alif lam? No. So when you make the ismul fa'il to go from indefinite to definite, you'll just add an alif lam. The ismul fa'il is qa'im and qa'ima, and to make it definite, you'll just add alif lam. If the weak letter, however, is the third letter, like the verb sa'a, to run, in that case there will be a difference. For the masculine, it will be sa'in if it's indefinite, and when it becomes definite, as-sa'i, with no dhamma. There's no dhamma or kasra that can come on that ya. If it's mansoob though, you will say as-sa'iyah. For the feminine, it will be formed regularly. There's no change that word will undergo. Sa'iyatun, as-sa'iyatun. So just be aware that there are two types of changes that verbs with a weak letter will undergo. If the weak letter is the third letter, then you have that irregular formulation of the ismul fa'il. But if the weak letter is in the middle, if it's the second letter, then the formulation of the ismul fa'il is predictable. The middle letter will turn into a hamza. And if you add alif lam, then there's no other change that the word will undergo. You can add it. One other note, which does not directly relate to the exercises, but just to be aware, there are some cases where the same word might have the possibility of being a doubled letter, or having the third letter be a weak letter. Because when the third letter is a weak letter, it sometimes gets dropped. So if you see, just as an example, this verb, that could be jarru, which would be from the root letter jim, ra, ra. The plural form fa'alu would be shortened, jararu would be shortened to jarru. And jarra means to pull. It could also be jaraw, in which case it would be from the root letter jim, ra, ya. And remember how that conjugation sa'a will become sa'aw, ata will become ataw. That third letter will be dropped. So if there's no haraka, it would be written the same way. It might be written like that, and that could either be jarru from jarara, or jaraw from jim ra ya. Jarra means to pull, and jara means to run or to flow. Al-ma'ul jari means flowing water or running water. So when you see a word, you might sometimes only see two letters that belong to the root letter, and then you'll have to make an educated guess whether the second one is doubled or whether there might be a missing letter. And sometimes you'll know other words within the same family that can give you an indication. In other cases, the context might not be clear, and if you're looking up the word in a dictionary, you'd have to look up both. So you would look up jaraya or jarawa, because it could be either, and you look up jarara and see which one fits. They might not always both be used. In other cases, the context will make it clear because a similar word will be used elsewhere. Right, so you can say, for example, jarartu wa jarru. I pulled and they pulled. Well, that'll make it clear that it's jarra. Other words from this root, jarara, the word jar and majroor that we use is from that same root. It literally means to be pulled. Al-jar, the genitive case, is also from this root. From this root, jari, majra. Majra is the path through which something flows, or a current. Jarayan, the flowing or an event, something that flows. So those are words that are from the same root. So you can write down those examples. That's just to be aware in the future. You can't always assume that there's a letter that's doubled or a letter missing. You have to sometimes look at both possibilities, and you can think of other examples for that as well. So let's look at the exercises now. The first word that we're given is ata, meaning ata means to come. Ata by itself is to come, and ata be, when it's used with the be, is to bring. We've seen that, and we'll see it in the exercises again. So what is the ismul fa'il for ata? Masculine? Actually, yeah, those two dots shouldn't be there. Atin. And then if it's definite, it will be al-a-ti. The weak letter will be dropped in the masculine form. The tanween will take its place, or will substitute. With the alif lam, the ya will return, but there will be no dhamma that will be possible on the ya. So we won't say al-atiyu, we'll say al-ati. And the feminine? Atiyatun and al-atiya. Two. This is a case where the weak letter is the third letter. We'll get to that. We'll do those separately. The next verb is da'a. What does da'a mean? To call, right? Or he called. And the ism al-fa'il? Da'in. And with alif lam? Ad-da'i. Ad-da'i. And the feminine? Da'iyatun. And Ad-da'iya. Is that clear? Questions? So, just to take one example, da'in. If it's marfu, we'll say ja'a da'in, correct? A caller came. If it's mansub, ra'aytu, what will I say? Da'iyan. Thank you. Why? Because remember, with the mansub, it will take the fatha. If it has alif lam, it would be ad-da'iya. And if there's no alif lam, it would be da'iyan. And if it's majroor, it will be marartu bida'in. It will be the same as the marfu' form. This tanween is not for jar. It's to make up for that missing ya. So ja'a da'in, marartu bida'in. The marfu' and the majroor form will look the same. There's no questions on if that's clear. One thing to be aware of is that if you're looking at older texts, da'iya is one word that is sometimes used with the ta for a masculine. And yes, there are some words in Arabic that have a ta added not to make a feminine form, but to indicate excessive action, to indicate that an action is done frequently or excessively. And da'iya is one of those examples. So da'iya could mean a female who calls. It could be the feminine of da'in. It could also mean somebody who calls very frequently. You're familiar with one example of that, the word allama. Allama is used to describe men and not just women. It's not the feminine for allam, but it means somebody who knows a lot. Da'iya is a very common example. Da'iya, somebody who is a propagator or a preacher. And another example that's used with somewhat greater frequency than other words is the word rawiya. Rawiya means a narrator, especially a narrator of poetry. So you could say, huwa rawiyatu fulan. He is the frequent narrator from so-and-so, or somebody who narrates. In that case, this ta is not used for the feminine. You won't see that with all words. You'll see it with da'iya, with rawiya, and then infrequently with some other words as well. The next verb we have is nama, meaning to sleep. Ism al-fa'il will be na'im, and the feminine will be na'imatun. And with an alif lam, you'll just add an alif lam. An-na'imu, an-na'imatu. No change will take place. This is one other example where you will sometimes have words that can be confusing. Let's take a look at this example. If you see this word, you can read it as, for example, nimtu, or nimta, or nimti. That would be from nama. Right? When you conjugate that verb, the middle letter is dropped. So you will say nimta, or nimti, or nimtu. Right? Nimtu, I slept. Another possibility though, so this nimtu will be from the same root word nama, which is originally nun, waw, mim, no. Right? Nom is where nama comes from, just like qala comes from qawl, kana comes from qawl. It's originally a waw. Right? Let's review. Another possibility is that it could be from namat. And that is also review. The word da'at, remember if you conjugate da'a, da'a, da'aya, da'aw, and then the feminine singular, the hiya form. She called, hiya, da'at. Similarly, namat. Da'at came from dal, ain, waw. Namat will come from noon, mim, waw. An-numu, which means growth. Growth or development. So that word would be nama, huwa nama, yeah, namat. Right, so it would be nama, and then the dual would be namawa, like da'awa. If I said da'aya, that's wrong. It's da'awa, namawa, and then namo, like da'aw, namat, namata, and what's the pattern that we have for the feminine plural, the hunna form? Plural? No, there's no. This is the third person, so it's katabna, da'awna, namona. That's it all. The waw will return. So review that. That is something that can frequently be confusing, because in certain cases the waw will change to an alif. In some cases the waw will be dropped, like here and here and here, and then in other cases the waw will remain, like here and here, and then the remaining conjugations will be regular. The pattern that we discussed was da'a. So if you look at that pattern, then you'll see the same principle being applied. So this form could be nimtu or it could be namat. Theoretically, it could also be namata if there were a verb that had nun, mim, ta as the root letters. But that's very frequent. There's very rarely going to be a word where the third letter is a ta. There are some examples like anat, ain, nun, ta, but it's rare in Arabic. Okay, the next verb that we have is sa'ala. What does that mean? He asked or questioned. The ism al-fa'il will be sa'il and the feminine form will be somebody? Sa'ila. And if you add an alif lam, it will be definite. Ra'a, what does ra'a mean? To see. The ism al-fa'il will be ra'in. And with alif lam, that would be ar-ra'i. Ra'iyatun and ar-ra'iyatu. Question? Next is kana. What does kana mean? The past, yeah, to be. So was or were. The ism al-fa'il ka'in. And feminine? Ka'ina.
So, active he.
Ka'in.
He was, because the doer is fa'il, so what would ka'in actually mean?
Ka'in means one who is.
He just is. Isn't it?
One who
That's
is.
not active, it's I guess to be.
Well, it's ka'in is referring to the entity that exists. So kana literally denotes to exist or to be something. One of those two meanings. Ka'in is therefore the thing that exists or the thing that is something else. So kana has two possible meanings. Can mean to subsist, in which case ka'in would mean that which exists. Or kana can mean to be something, in which case ka'in or ka'ina is that which is something. Right, so I can say I think therefore I exist. You could use ka'in or kana. There's also other words that exist in Arabic for that. Philosophically in Arabic for to exist, the commonly used word is wujida, mawjood. Right? So something that exists is called mawjood. But that's a philosophical term that came into Arabic usage when philosophy started to be translated into Arabic. I'm not sure if it's originally derived from a Greek usage or from what, but prior to the entry of philosophy into Arabic, to say to exist, they would say kana, thabata. Right? Wujida literally means to be found, but it can also be used for to exist. Ka'in. The most common usage for ka'in is an entity. So you'll say that هذا كائن صغير. This is a small entity. It can be used for that meaning. We'll see examples of the usage of these in the future as well. Next verb that we have is khafa, meaning to be scared or to fear. And the ism al-fa'il, khaif, and the feminine, khaifa. With alif lam, it will just be al-khaif and al-khaifa. The next that we have is amara, meaning to command. Sorry?
Is amara weak?
Amara, no, it's not weak.
It's not weak.
It's not weak, but the writing is non-standard. So that's why he probably gave it as an example. What is ism al-fa'il? Amir. So it has a mad. Right, the two alifs, or the hamza and then the alif, are combined into one letter. And the feminine? Amiratun. With alif lam, you'll just add alif lam, al-amir, al-amira. Nothing else will change. No, you can write it either way. If you wanted to write it like this, it would not be wrong. In fact, if you wanted to write it like this, it would not be wrong either. Amir. In the Uthman Taha Quran, it's usually written like this.
Yeah, I thought the hamza had to sit on something.
No, the hamza does not have to sit on anything, and actually the hamzas were never originally written in the Quran. So any way you figure it, it's something that is added for our convenience, or to make it easier to read. It's not originally part of the Quranic script, and according to some hadith, it was never pronounced either. So there is a hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam that they didn't used to pronounce the hamza either. Not just that they didn't used to write it.
What would Allah be then? There's a hamza there.
The hamza would not be pronounced in cases where it is permissible to elide it into a vowel. So in Arabic, there's a lot of places where the hamza can be elided into a vowel. That's a separate topic. But for example, in Surah Tawheed, we say وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ, or we can say كُفُوًا or كُفْأً أَحَدٍ. Right? So it's permissible to say كُفُوًا or كُفْأً, and
so there's actually a hamza sitting on that wow?
Well, that's the normal usage in Arabic. And according to many dialects of Arabic, that's the better dialect. But in the Quran, generally, at least in the Uthman Taha Quran, which is based on the most common narration, we'll read it kufuwan.
So that's what you mean.
So yes, there are some narrations that, for example, that form is not used.
Okay.
Elsewhere as well. So in, for example, Ra's, meaning head, that can be pronounced Ras.
Say the two again?
Ra's.
Ra's.
Ras.
Okay,
They both mean head.
Yeah.
Or the verb sa'ala, he asked, can also be pronounced sala. Sala, which is confusing because it can also mean to flow. Sala means to flow. So these are different possible dialects, and in all honesty, we don't actually know how those words were pronounced by the Prophet or by Imam Ali or Quraysh. There's certain narrations that indicate that it's not the way that it's pronounced now, and that's accepted by both Shi'i and Sunni reports. That's not the same thing as the Quran being tampered with, because it's just a different accent or recitation of the same text in most cases. The non-pronunciation would mean that in certain cases the hamza, just like it's not written in the Quran, the hamza would not be pronounced. But for example, it would be pronounced as an alif. So ra's in the Quran would be pronounced ras. Inshallah, one day when we get a little bit further, we mentioned a few examples of these just because many of our examples are from the Quran and the writing is different from the Quran. But don't get confused by it. Right? When we talk about the writing of the Quran or when we give these examples, the main reason that I do that is because most of the examples that we are looking at are examples that are from the Quran. But you don't need to worry about that because that is not part of learning Arabic and using Arabic. So store it away, or if you want to write it down as a note, that's fine, but don't get caught up in a question of how is the Quran written or why is it written that way and not as we're used to seeing it. So Amara will be Amir. Qala, meaning he said, will be what? Qa'il and Qa'ilatun. Correct. Qama meaning what? He stood. That's 2 dots. And the Ism al-Fa'il will be Qa'im and feminine Qa'imatun. In both cases you will just add alif lam if it's definite. Then we had the verb rama. What does rama mean? To throw. It can be a stone or anything else. And it can be literal, to throw. And it can be literal or figurative. So one of the usages that's found also in the Quran is to accuse, like to throw an accusation. That's a figurative usage. But rama means to throw. What is the Ism al-Fa'il? Ramin. And arra mi. Ramiyatun. And arramiyatu. And then akala, what does akala mean? He ate. It's not irregular. It's like amara, right? So we'll say akil and akilatun. Questions? So that what we just discussed was Ismul Fa'il. And now we're going to look at Ismul Maf'ul.
Is it different just to say fa'il? Or you have to say
Ismul Fa'il. Because Ismul Fa'il relates to a word. Fa'il is something that pertains to the role of a word in a sentence.
Okay, so
they're 2 separate things. Ismul Fa'il is a morphological question. Right? The word itself. What is the form of the word? In Arabic, that's called sarf. Whereas fa'il is a syntactical question, or in Arabic, nahu. So you can only have a fa'il or a maf'ul if there is a sentence. But you can have an ismul fa'il or an ismul maf'ul without a sentence. Because ismul fa'il is the word itself. That action that is denoted by that word. Is it the doer of that action or the one to whom that action is done? That's what determines ismul fa'il or ismul maf'ul.
They have the same form.
If you see what in the sentence?
A fa'il or an ismul fa'il.
No, we mentioned a few examples of this. You can have an ismul fa'il that is used as a maf'ul in a sentence. So you can say, for example, right? Ja'al alim. Here, al-alim is ismul fa'il because it's the one who knows, and it's also the fa'il of the sentence, right? The alim came. But I can also say ja'al madroob. In this case, madroob is ismul maf'ul because it is the one who is hit. It's ismul maf'ul. But is it the maf'ul of the sentence? It's still the fa'il of the sentence because that's the person who is coming. So here the one who is coming is the scholar. Here the one who is coming is the person who was hit. In both cases, this word is fa'il, the doer, and that's why it's marfu'. But in this case, the word itself is ismul fa'il because it's the one who knows. In this case, the word itself is ismul maf'ul because it is the one who is known.
So, okay, but I think
Yeah, make sure that you are keeping those two concepts separate in your mind. Ismul fa'il is different from fa'il. Ismul maf'ul is different from maf'ul. So let's quickly go through the ismul maf'ul of those words that can form an ismul maf'ul. Does ata have an ismul maf'ul? Ma'ti. And the feminine? Ma'tiyya. Ma'tiyyatun.
something was brought to him.
So, ata can mean to come to something. So, you'll say, for example, ataytul bayta. I came to the house. And therefore, the house will be ma'ati, that which was approached. So, the thing that is approached, the thing that somebody came to. Ata can also mean to do an action. So I can say ma'ati would be the action that is done. To come to an action or to do an action. Ma'ati can be an action that is done.
There's a hamza on the alif.
Yes, it's ma'ati.
Okay, so in the lesson notes we did the ma'ati. It looks like it's a sukoon. Is that not correct?
Well, there will be a sukoon too, so you can put a sukoon there.
Okay. So should there be a hamza on the mahadi as well?
No, that's the hamza will only come if there is the letter is a hamza.
Okay.
So in that case, the word mahdi, it's the same form, but the first letter is a ha, and so there'll just be a sukoon. Here, the first letter happens to be a hamza, and there's a sukoon on the hamza. So it's ma'ti, ma'tiyya. Da'a, can that have ismul maf'ul? Can? What would it be? Mad'u and mad'uwa. Because it's originally a waw.
Yeah.
Nama, can nama have an ismul maf'ul? No.
No.
Because to sleep is intransitive. You don't sleep something. There is a na'im, somebody who sleeps, but there's no person who has slept. It's not. To be put to sleep is anama or nawwama. It's a different verb. We haven't covered that yet. Sa'ala. Can that be made passive? It can. Sa'ala is to ask, and you can ask somebody. Right? So what would the form be? Mas'ul. And the feminine? Mas'ulatun. This is the way that it is normally written, and the way it is quote unquote correct to write it. You will sometimes see it like this. The hamza is sometimes put on a ya, right? books published in Iran and Egypt will sometimes have that form. But the more common form, books published in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, will generally have this form. And that's considered to be more correct. Mas'ul. So you can see both of those. The word ra'a, will that have a passive form? Or an ism maf'ul? Ra'a? Yes, to be seen. And so that thing which is seen will be? Yes, mar'i. With a shadda on the ya. Right, this is similar to Mahdi or Marmi. There's a shadda on the ya. Mar'i. The hamza is no longer going to be written on an alif. It's going to be written on a little ya, but it's the same hamza. Ra'a will write mar'i. And the feminine will be mar'iyatun. Right, both of them can take tanween, because it's a ya with a shadda on it, so we can say mar'iyun, mar'iyatun. That which is seen. Kana. Can kana take an ismul maf'ul? No, it can't. Right. Khafa. Can khafa take an ismul maf'ul? Not to put fear, but khafa means to fear something. So, that which one is afraid of. The feared thing. Or person. And what will it be? Makhuf. Makhuf. And makhufatun.
First, sa'ala. Why is it mas'ul? Why is it mas'ul?
Mas'ul in sa'ala because there is a hamza. So it will become mas'ul. The next word is amara. Can amara take ismul maf'ul? Ma'mur. And of course ma'mura. Qala. Maqul, that which is said. And maqulatun, that which is said. Right? Maqul and maqula is used for speech. Qama, there's no passive form because qama means to stand. No, to stand is intransitive. You don't stand something. That's a different word. So to stand something up in Arabic is not qama. It's aqama. It's a different verb. So qama in Arabic is to stand up. Intransitive. Right? To get up, basically. Next word is rama, to throw. And of course something can be thrown. That will be marmi. Yun with a shadda. Or marmiyatun. And then akala will be ma'akul, that which is eaten. Feminine. Ma'akulatun. Okay. Now, to save some time, I'm going to read and translate these sentences from Arabic into English quickly. If you have a question, ask me right away after the sentence, otherwise I will continue. So, raise your hand if you have a question. The first sentence, Inna al-Yahuda atat an-Nabiyya. They came to the Prophet. So, an-Nabiyya is maf'ul. They came to the Prophet. The Jews came to the Prophet. فَسَأَلَتْهُ. And they asked him. Sa'alat is feminine because Yahud as a group can be treated as feminine. So you can say sa'aluhu, they asked him, or you can say sa'alathu because a group is a jama'ah.
It's people.
A group in Arabic can be treated as feminine singular. You can use it as plural. You can say sa'alu, they, or you can say sa'alat, the group. فَسَأَلَتْهُ عَنْ خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ, about the creation of the skies, وَالْأَرْضِ, and the creation of the heavens. فَقَالَ, so he said, meaning the Prophet said, خَلَقَ اللَّهُ الْأَرْضَ, God created the earth, يَوْمَ الْأَحَدِ, on the day of Sunday, وَالْإِثْنَيْنِ, and Monday. It's not a verse of Quran, it's a sentence made up by the author of the book, so don't assume that this is a hadith or anything like that. Next sentence. قَالَ قَائِلٌ آخَرُ, آخر is غير منصرف, so it doesn't take tanween. So if you had آخرun, you have to take away the tanween. It's a sifa, قائلٌ, but there's no tanween on آخر. It's a sifa. So قائلٌ آخر, a speaker, another speaker. And then you can put a colon after the آخر, because this is what they're saying. Question?
In the first sentence, after it refers back to the Yahud.
In the first sentence, atat refers to the Yahud.
Yahud is plural.
Yahud is plural, but it also refers to a group. And as a group, you can treat it as feminine singular. A group can be treated as singular. قالت اليهود, the Jews said. Back to sentence 2. قال قائل آخر, another speaker said. And then this is now the speech. أخذ رسول الله بيدي, the Prophet of God took my hand, or seized or grabbed my hand. فقال, and then he said, خلق الله التربة, God created dust. Turbata, because that's what is created. يوم السبت, يوم السبت, on the day of Saturday. وخلق الجبال, and he created the mountains. يوم الأحد, on the day of Sunday.
So Yom is mansub because
Yom is mansub because
connected to that turba, and
Yom is mansub because it is an adverb of time or place. Adverbs of time or place are mansub. It's not called hal, it's called maf'ul fi. We've seen examples of it. I don't think we've covered it formally yet. So we've seen some examples. We'll talk about the details of it when it comes up in the future. But be aware that adverbs of time and place are mansub. Next sentence. Ya nisa an-nabiyye, that is, ya is a vocative, it's calling out. Nisa an-nabiyye, that's mudaf ilay. Lastunna, that is the second person feminine plural. Ka'ahadin minan nisa'i, like any one of the women. That is part of the verse of the Quran. Not the entire verse. Next sentence. Amarani bi'ibadati Allahi mukhlisan lahu. Amarani, he commanded me. Me is the maf'ul. Bi'ibadati Allah, commanded me to worship God, or for the worship of God. Mukhlisan, this is a hal, in the state of sincerity towards Him.
So that means, is that feminine?
Ibadah is a masdar. So it's not an adjective. قال النبي, the Prophet said, and then you can put 2 colons. The sentence that comes after it is what the Prophet said. Lastu ka'ahadikum. I am not ka'ahadikum. Ka is a harf and it gives jar. So ahad is majroor. Ahadi. And then, of course, ahad is mudaf and kum is mudaf ilayh. Ka'ahadikum.
Technically, it's mudaf, or is it just an included pronoun?
In Arabic, it's considered to be mudaf. So, if you have an included pronoun or an attached pronoun, that is mudaf ilayh, and the noun before it is mudaf. Kitabi, kitab is mudaf, ya is mudaf ilayh. Kitabuhu, kitab is mudaf, and hu is mudaf ilayh. So there's no difference between saying kitabuhu and saying kitabu zaydin. There's mudaf and mudaf ilayh. So I'll just put that sentence on here so we can see it. Lastu ka'ahadikum. Right? Here we have several parts. Lastu is the verb, and the verb is laysa. The tu is the ism of laysa, the subject. Ka'ahadikum, the entirety is the predicate, or the khabar of laysa. Ka is harful jar, and ahadi is majroor. But ahadi does not take tanween because ahad by itself is mudaf and kum is mudaf ilayh. And that entire phrase, the jar plus the majroor, is the khabar of laysa. I am not like any of you. When ka is used in this form, you can replace it with the word mithl in Arabic. So you can say lastu mithla ahadikum. I'm not like one of you. No, mithl is a noun. But if you want to make the sentence a little bit easier to understand if it's ambiguous, or if it's not easy to understand, then you could put kaf. This kaf gives the same meaning as mithl. No, it'd still be ahadikum, because mithl would be mudaf to ahad. So you'll say lastu mithla ahadikum, and mithl would be mudaf to ahad. Right? Mithl would be mansub, because it would then be the khabar of lastu. Next sentence. قَدْ فَعَلَ الصَّالِحُونَ. The righteous have done مَا أَمَرَهُمُ اللَّهُ بِهِ. They have done, ma here is the maf'ul. They have done that what, that which. أَمَرَهُمُ اللَّهُ بِهِ is to, so to speak, complete that ma. They have done ma, that thing. What thing? أَمَرَهُمُ اللَّهُ بِهِ, that Allah has commanded them to do it. Next sentence. الدُّنْيَا مَلْعُونَةٌ. The world is cursed. وَمَلْعُونٌ مَا فِيهَا. And cursed is what is in it. Ma here means that which. It's like alladhi. It's not for to negate. So mal'oonun alladhi fiha, that which is in it. Illa dhikr Allah, except the remembrance of God. Dhikr Allah. It won't be majroor. Illa, as we discussed, the word after illa will generally be mansub. There are certain exceptions, we didn't cover the exceptions. But in in affirmative sentence, it will generally be mansub. So if in doubt, the word after illa will be mansub.
Is dunya always spelled with the alif?
Ad-dunya is always spelled with an alif. Dunya. Next sentence, hadakum, he guided you. Wa kuntum min qablihi, and you were prior to that. لَمِنَ الضَّالِّينَ. To make it the normal way that sentence would be said in Arabic, take away the lam. كُنْتُم مِّنَ الضَّالِّينَ. You were among the ones who were astray. No, keep the min qablihi, take away the la in lamin. So turn lamin to min. The way it's used in the Quran is a slightly different usage, which is why the Quran will often have it with the lam. This is a sentence that is not the exact quotation from the Quran. It's not the exact verse of the Quran. And therefore, it should say, Kuntum min qablihi min ad-dallin. You were before that among the deviated, or the ones who were astray. Right? In this case, it could be either. So, hadakum wa kuntum min qablihi. He guided you, and you were before. That could make sense. It could also mean while. He guided you while you were before. Normally, if the waw is waw al-hal, and the verb after it is a past tense madi verb, a qad will come before it. So normally we would say, hadakum wa qad kuntum min qablihi. He guided you while you had been. But either translation could fit here. So say, in qablihi min ad-dallin. You were among the ones who were astray. وَكُنْتُمْ بِعِبَادَتِكُمْ كَافِرِينَ. And you were بِعِبَادَتِكُمْ with your worship, or with regard to your worship, disbelievers. That's also an odd sentence in Arabic. You wouldn't normally say you were with respect to your worship, disbelievers.
You would just say kuntum kafirin.
وَكُنْتُمْ كَافِرِينَ بِعِبَادَتِهِ, with respect to worshipping him.
Kafirin already doesn't that apply that?
Kafirin simply means to
But if
be
anyone was
hiding
writing-
something or covering something up.
Right.
It could be with worship, it could be with regard to gratitude for a blessing. So kafirin bil ibadah means to be a disbeliever or to be
In terms of
covering up
post-Quran,
worship.
Post-Islamic Arabic.
No, kafara,
No?
even after the Quran, for a time, could be used in its literal sense. Nowadays, at least kafir will only be used for a disbeliever. And probably kafara would also be used either for a disbeliever or for ingratitude, but not for covering up in a general sense. Next sentence, وَجَدْتُهُ ضَالًّا فَهَدَيْتُهُ. I found him ضَالًّا, astray, فَهَدَيْتُهُ, and I guided him. ضَالًّا is, you can think of it as a hal. There's actually a better grammatical analysis of it, but we haven't covered it. So you can think of it as wajadtuhu, I found him in the state of being lost. Grammatically, that's correct, but that's not
what's being done here.
that's not normally how it's grammatically analyzed. So, وَجَدْتُهُ ضَالًّا, I found him astray, فهديته, and I guided him. وإنك, and you are هاد, a guide, لكل قوم, for every people. That sentence is also
You're saying you would put had in after innaka?
no, it's based on the wording is based on a Quranic verse, but it's not the Quranic wording. So don't confuse it because it sounds similar with a Quranic verse. Grammatically, that's fine. Innaka, you are. Hadin is the predicate there, a guide, and likulli qawmin is ijar wa majrur. Right? Who are you a guide for? For every people. And the next sentence is ana ba'ithun lakum. It's not inna, because inna would have been plural. So ana. Ana. Inna is short for inna na. And that's plural.
Right.
Because na is a plural pronoun. So ana is singular. Ana ba'ithun, I am sending. Lakum, for you. Kitaban. Kitaban is mansub because it's maf'ul. Sending a book. قد كتبت فيه, I have written in it. And then kulla, because it's maf'ul. I have written what? Everything. ما ذكر لي, ما ذكر لي. Every.
Kul in this sentence is like the Jamal.
Kul, no, is everything. So I have written in it kulla ma, everything that. Ma here is the thing which, or that which, and not for negation. Kulla ma, kulla alladhi, everything that. ذكر لي الرجل الذي كان عندي, that the man mentioned to me الذي كان عندي, who was with me. So that man who was with me mentioned to me. I wrote all of those things. Kulla is the maf'ul of katabtu. I wrote, what did I write?
Okay.
Kulla, everything.
Okay.
Ma, that. Everything that. ذكر لي الرجل, that the man mentioned to me. Which man? الذي كان عندي, who was with me. Is that clear?
Dhakara is like dhikr.
Dhakara can mean to mention or to remember. Alright, the remaining sentences that are in English, what I will do is I will send them to you inshallah, and we'll put them on our Yahoo group, sample translations in Arabic. And if you have any questions, then you can send them to me by email, or we can discuss them at the beginning of next class. Let's continue with the material that we were discussing with the imperfect verb. Now, sometimes we will speak of past and present, but the more appropriate way to speak in Arabic is of the perfect and the imperfect. Because the mudari', which we're covering now, the imperfect, it can refer to the present tense, it can refer to the future tense, and in many cases, the way that the tenses are used in Arabic does not correspond to the way that they're used in English. So don't think of always translating something literally according to what tense it is. The conception of time is different in Arabic than it is in English.
Tense for future.
There's no separate future tense in Arabic. There's different ways of expressing the future tense, which we'll look at. So we discussed the basic forms of the verb last session. One thing that I wanted to mention is that when it comes to the imperfect mudari' verb, the pronouns will not always be the same as they were in the madi. Sometimes the pronoun will be different.
Standalone pronoun as well as the combined.
Well, the pronoun that refers to the one who is doing the action. So, in some cases it'll be the same pronoun, right? Fa'ala is past, or is madi. What is the pronoun? Huwa is hidden in it. The imperfect, yaf'alu, there's also a huwa hidden. Fa'alat, what is the pronoun? Hiya, that's hidden in it. The imperfect is taf'alu, the pronoun will also be hiya. Fa'alu, masculine plural, what's the pronoun? No, this waw. The waw is the pronoun. Yaf'aluna, what's the pronoun? Also a waw. So in some cases the pronoun will be the same. But in other cases the pronoun will not be the same. Right? So for example, fa'altunna, feminine plural, all of you did. Pronoun is tunna. Right? In the mudari' that will be taf'alna. Pronoun will be this noon. It's a different pronoun. Right? You can look at the chart to get all of the details, but these are just some examples. One other example, fa'alna, we did. What's the pronoun? Na. Naf'alu is the mudari'. What's the pronoun? A hidden nahnu. Right? So, in some cases, the pronoun will correspond to the past or the madi form. In other cases, the pronoun will not correspond. Just like in the madi, sometimes the pronoun is a hidden pronoun. In the mudari', sometimes the pronoun is a hidden pronoun.
If you say that tenses don't mean the same thing, like he will do or he is doing.
Well, no, generally it will correspond. So generally the madi is used for the past. Generally the mudari' is used for present or future or habitual or continuous or progressive. So it generally works, but not always. One other thing to remember with the mudari' is that there are different shades of meaning that require a different i'rab. So with the madi verb, you're never going to be asked, what is the i'rab? But with the mudari' verb, you do need to know the i'rab, just like a noun. Right? Just like zaydun and zaydan and zaydin have a different function, the mudari' can take i'rab. But the i'rab that a mudari' can take is different from a noun. The i'rab of a mudari' verb will be either marfu' or mansub or majzoom. Majzoom, not majroor. So these two exist for nouns as well. Nouns can be marfu', verbs can be marfu'. Nouns can be mansub, fi'l mudari' can be mansub. But fi'l mudari' can be majzoom, a noun will never be majzoom. And these different tenses, or these different i'rab, they correspond to a different shade of meaning.
You can use instead of yaf'alu, you can use yaf'ala.
You can, instead of saying yaf'alu, you can say yaf'ala. And you will never say yaf'ali, but you can say yaf'al with a sukoon if it's majzoom. So majzoom is the third form of i'rab.
But nouns don't take that.
Nouns will not have majzoom for case. Now, the default for a verb is marfu'. So if you don't have any reason to consider it mansoob or majzoom, it's marfu'. It's just a normal indicative verb, right? A verb that conveys its meaning. Yaf'alu, he does. The mansoob is used if the meaning is slightly different. One example is if I change yaf'alu, he does, to for him to do, or that he may do. Right? Still mudari', it's still in the present or future, but now instead of saying he does, I'm saying for him to do. Right? That's one example of when a verb will become mansoob. And we'll talk about exactly when it will become mansoob. It's covered later. I'm just giving you an example of why would you introduce this complexity into the language. Well, the reason is that yaf'alu means he does. It doesn't mean for him to do. That would be with an yaf'ala.
Sounds like it's going.
It's not the tense. I think it might be called mood in English, or it changes. With nouns, it's called case, but with verbs, I think they call it like the subjunctive mood, or the conditional mood, right? So the conditional, the subjunctive. But don't worry about what they call it in English, because in Arabic it's called i'rab. And for simplicity, you can call it case. Majzoom is another form of meaning. So, for example, if I want to use the conditional, I don't want to say he goes, but if he goes, in yadhhab. Right? So, a conditional, right? If he goes is different from saying for him to go, is different from saying he goes, right? And those different moods, or those different cases, those different shades of meaning that are expressed with a different i'rab, right? We'll talk about the details. That's not to give you, more information than you need right now, but that's the reason why we have different cases. What you do need to know right now, though, is that in a verb there is a sign for the case. And that is different for the different forms of the verb. Which is why this beautiful chart has not just the form of the verb itself, yaf'alu, and the pronoun, but in the middle there it has i'rab. What is the i'rab? Right? So let's go through all 14 forms, and we'll just look at what the i'rab of each form is. I'll write it up here. So if you look at the chart, yaf'alu, it tells you that the dhamma is the i'rab. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Which means that if the i'rab changes, the dhamma will change. In this case, if it's mansoob, we'll say yaf'ala. And if it's majzoom, we'll say yaf'al. So the dhamma tells you it's marfu'. Because when it's mansoob or majzoom, the dhamma disappears. Make sense? The next example is yaf'alane. What is the sign of the marfu'? The noon. So if it's mansoob, we'll say yaf'ala. If it's majzoom, we'll also say yaf'ala.
In the form of like
We'll talk about the other issues as they come up. So let's not cloud the picture right now. Is that clear? The noon tells us the i'rab. So if it's not marfu', the noon will disappear.
Is that general for all, when there's a letter for the i'rab rather than stuff like that, you just drop it? Is that general for all of these?
The noon, yeah. If the noon is sign of i'rab, you'll drop it. The plural will be yaf'aluna. Here, the noon is also for i'rab. So if it's mansoob, we'll say yaf'alu. Notice that we'll write an alif. We'll add this alif, kind of as a place marker that that's the end of the word. The majroor will also be yaf'alu. Majzoom. Thank you. The majzoom. For the feminine, and this is all in your chart, you don't need to be writing it down. Taf'alu. And what does the chart say the sign of i'rab is? The dhamma. So if it's mansoob, we'll say taf'ala. And if it's majzoom, we'll say taf'al. For the dual, the same thing as the masculine dual. Taf'alane will become taf'ala, both for the majzoom and the mansoob. Right? The dangerous verse of the Quran in Surah Tahrim, in tatuba. Right? Tatuba. Yatubo means to seek repentance. Tatubo is the second person masculine. You seek repentance. Tatubane would be both for masculine and feminine. The two of you seek repentance. In tatuba, if the two of you seek repentance. That's not mansoob, it's majzoom. It's conditional. Right? If you seek repentance, right? Speaking to the two wives of the Prophet who had betrayed the Prophet in Surah Tahrim. But if you seek repentance, and then Allah says that, well, you went astray, even if you seek repentance. So that's one example of the majzoom form in the Quran. The other examples you can look at in the chart. On the next page, we have the different patterns of a verb. We mentioned when we were doing the Madi form that a Madi form of the verb can have one of three possible forms. Right? It can be like Nasara, or like Alima, or like Sharufa. Right? Sharufa. So the middle letter can have a fatha or a kasra or a dhamma. In the mudari', you have those same three possibilities. If the madi has a fatha, then the mudari' can have a dhamma, like in yansuru. You can also have a Madi with a fatha and a mudari' with a kasra, like in daraba, yadribu. And you can have a fatha with a fatha, like in fataha, yaftahu. So if the Madi has a fa'ala form, you can have a dhamma in the mudari', yansuru, or a kasra, yadribu, or a fatha, yaftahu. If the Madi has a kasra in the middle letter, alima, almost always the mudari' will have a fatha. Ya'lamu. And sometimes you can have a kasra, like in hasiba, yahsibu. Even that's not a very good example because in general you will say hasiba yahsabu, but you can say yahsibu. In the Quran it's used yahsabu, so it fits the normal pattern, alima ya'lamu, hasiba yahsabu, but it can be used yahsibu. And there's a slight difference in them. No, alama is not used. It's alima. There's no ya'lim. It's alima ya'lamu. And sharufa keeps it easy. If the madi has a dhamma, the mudari' will always have a dhamma. Yashrufu. So that gives us a total of 6 possibilities. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those are mentioned in the chart. Nasara yansuru, daraba yadribu, fataha yaftahu, sami'a yasma'u, hasiba yahsibu, karuma yakrumu.
So karuma yak, that's like the easiest. If you see a dhamma,
Karuma yakrumu is the
it'll always
easiest.
be. But if it's the standard nasara, it could be, you just have to know that it's yansiru. There's no other way, there's no real.
There are some sort of hints that are given for when it would be yaf'ulu and yaf'ilu and yaf'alu. It's easier just to memorize the usage. Also, the fa'ila form, alima, sami'a, amila, that's also easy because it will almost always be ya'malun or ya'malu. Sami'a yasma'u. Amila ya'malu, alima ya'lamu. If the second letter has a kasra in the madi, it's almost always a fatha in the mudari'. Hasiba yahsabu. Hasiba yahsibu is to give an example. It's used, but it's an infrequent usage. You can use hasiba yahsibu and hasiba yahsabu, and there is a slight difference in meaning, but even that slight difference in meaning is not entirely clear, because hasiba can mean to calculate, and it can mean to reckon, like to assume. Just like the word reckon in English can literally mean to count, or it can mean, I think. I reckon he's a smart person. I think he's a smart person. So those meanings, both of those meanings are possible in hasiba yahsabu or yahsibu. So let's take a look at these verses from the Quran. وَيَفْعَلُ اللَّهُ مَا يَشَاءُ. Allah does مَا يَشَاءُ. This is maf'ul, what He pleases. يَفْعَلُ. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ. God knows. يَعْلَمُ مَا تَفْعَلُونَ. What you do. وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. يَعْلَمُونَ is masculine plural. يَعْلَمُ, he knows. مَا تَكْسِبُ كُلُّ نَفْسٍ. تَكْسِبُ kasaba yaksibu. تَكْسِبُ means to earn, and here it's feminine because كُلُّ نَفْسٍ is feminine. Nafs in Arabic is feminine. So كُلُّ نَفْسٍ is treated as feminine. تَكْسِبُ is feminine. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الْكُفَّارُ لِمَنْ عُقْبَ الدَّارِ. سَيَعْلَمُ, they will know. Kuffar is the fa'il, the subject. So يَعْلَمُ الْكُفَّارِ, the unbelievers will know.
The kuffar here is singular.
Kuffar is plural of
So
kafir.
it's same thing.
But the verb will be
But is it like Yahud?
singular.
No.
No.
Then this is masculine. Not feminine.
It's kuffar is a plural.
Yeah.
And Yahud is the name of a tribe.
But we use the he form, the huwa form. So is that just because you can do that? You should put it.
No, generally with the plural noun, the verb will be used if the noun is referring to a group of human beings. The verb will agree with the gender of the referent.
But
So
not necessarily
kuffar is masculine, ya'lamu will be masculine.
it didn't have to be ya'lamuna.
No, the verb will not be plural because the fa'il is mentioned after the verb.
After.
If the
It was before.
fa'il is a noun and not a pronoun, the verb will always be singular. The verb will only be plural
Okay, so
if there's no
before.
noun after it, and then a pronoun will be the fa'il that will refer back to another noun.
Okay, so even if it's the men, if you say the men in the sentence, you will use singular. If I said, say, ya'lamun, the kuffar, then in this case it's kuffar.
Al-kuffaru, because it's the fa'il, and it's mentioned after the verb, the verb will be singular. If al-kuffar had come before saya'lamu, right, then ya'lamu would require a pronoun that would refer back to kuffar. So I would say al-kuffaru saya'lamun, and that would be plural. The waw would be the fa'il. And so the fa'il will either be a pronoun or it will be a noun. It's not a pronoun, it won't be both. You won't say saya'lamun al-kuffar. So continuing on, inni a'lamu, I know, ma la ta'lamun, I know that which you do not know. A'lamu is ana, ta'lamun antum. وَنَطْبَعُ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ فَهُمْ لَا يَسْمَعُونَ. نَطْبَعُ is the nahnu form. We impress on their hearts, meaning a seal. فَهُمْ لَا يَسْمَعُونَ, so they do not hear, or they cannot hear. لَا أَعْبُدُ مَا تَعْبُدُونَ. أَعْبُدُ is the ana form, I do not worship. مَا تَعْبُدُونَ, what you worship. That's the antum form. أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, do you not understand, or do you not have reason? Afala is a series of huruf. A is used for a question. Fa, then. La is not. So afala ta'qilun. Do you not reason? وَيَجْعَلُونَ لِلَّهِ الْبَنَاتِ subhanahu. That's actually part of the next sentence. يَجْعَلُونَ, they make. For Allah, or they ascribe to Allah daughters. Banatan? No, it's وَيَجْعَلُونَ لِلَّهِ الْبَنَاتِ سُبْحَانَهُ وَلَهُمْ مَا يَشْتَهُونَ. Well, it's ملحق بالجمع المؤنث. So that's يجعلون is the verb. Al-banat is the plural of bint. It's an irregular plural. يجعلون will be the hum, masculine plural. إن الذين يأكلون is the hum, masculine form. إن الذين يأكلون, verily those who eat أموال اليتامى, the wealth of the orphans, ظلما, oppressively. إنما يأكلون, they only eat في بطونهم, in their bodies, نارا, fire. قل يا أهل الكتاب, say, O people of the book, لما تكفرون, why do you disbelieve بآيات الله, in the signs of God or in the verses of God. والله شهيد على ما تعملون, and God is a witness to what you do.
Shaheed, is that any different from like
Shaheed, the form is different from shahid. We haven't covered that difference. We'll come to it. They're both very similar. So take a look at those sentences. We did look at the chart last week, but we hadn't completed it. So look at the chart and recognize that with the imperfect verb fi'l mudari', there is a pronoun that's attached to some forms. That pronoun will never be dropped. So yaf'alani, that alif will not be dropped. But then there are some letters that are sometimes added for i'rab, like the noon in yaf'aluna. That noon can be dropped. So I can say yaf'aluna, and if it's not marfu', I will say yaf'alu. One other note, it's in the chart, but I want to just mention it so you're aware. The noon that comes in the two feminine plural forms, that is not a noon of i'rab. That is a pronoun. So when I say hunna yaf'alna, they do. Or antunna taf'alna, you all do, women. That noon is not like the noon of taf'alani, or yaf'aluna, or taf'aluna, or yaf'alani. This noon is the pronoun. And whether the verb is marfu' or mansub or majroor, majzoom, that noon will stay. But all other noons at the end of a verb, they are for i'rab. And therefore when the i'rab changes, they will drop. So for example, with the verb hazana, yahzanu, to grieve, right? We'll say tahzanina. That's the feminine singular. Anti tahzanina. You are grieving. Tahzanina. If it is majzoom, that noon will drop. And so I will say la tahzani. That noon will drop. Right? Because it's no longer marfu'. However, with yaf'alna, that noon will never drop. If I say la taf'alna, don't do it, it's still la taf'alna. La taf'alna, don't do it. The noon will not drop because it is part of the verb. It's a pronoun. And the pronoun is considered to be part of the verb. It's attached to it.
It's not that clear in this chart because studying this, I don't see anywhere where it describes when to drop it.
Well, anytime you see something in the chart that says it's i'rab,
yes,
that means that it's liable to be dropped or changed. So if you look at in the chart under the second person feminine singular, taf'alina, the noon shows up as i'rab, not as a pronoun. But if you go all the way to the left, in that case, the noon shows up as the pronoun.
But then you were saying that sometimes when you drop it, you have to add an alif for visual.
That's for the masculine plural. It's for the orthography, for the writing of it. And notice that in the chart, in the feminine plural, it says mabni. We'll talk about that in the future. The mabni means that it just never changes. You love mabni, yes. It's convenient because it's easy. And that will be something that we'll talk about when we talk about the i'rab and what the different forms of the verb can be. Questions, concerns, comments, complaints about how simple and easy Arabic is? Okay, that concludes today, so we can conclude with salawat.